right. Hey, out there, everyone, anyone. This is Matthew on Monday, working through the gospel lectionary text and maybe some other things if we get around to it. Today we are looking at the greatest commandment as spoken by Jesus in this gospel. And it is in Matthew 22. And we will go ahead and take a look at that real quickly while we see who might be joining us here. Here we go. All right, so Matthew, well, the lectionary text this week is Matthew 22:34 through, I think, 46. It goes on to the next little section. We'll read the greatest commandment here and then see what we decide to do next. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" He said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." I guess just for the sake of the lectionary, we'll go ahead and we can look at the next little section here. Now, while the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them this question: "What do you think of the Messiah? Whose son is he?" They said to him, "The son of David." And he said to them, "How is it then that David by the Spirit calls him Lord, saying, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet'? If David thus calls him Lord, how can he be his son?" No one was able to give him an answer, and nor from that day did anyone dare ask him any more questions. Okay, so that's the lectionary text of the gospel. What I'd like to do too, though, is to go back here. You shall love the Lord with all your heart, your soul, your mind, is the first part of that commandment, and then the love your neighbor as yourself. We can find the love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind in Deuteronomy. I won't go there, but I wanted to look at the love your neighbor as yourself section, which comes in Leviticus, everybody's favorite. So let's go to Leviticus 19. Just a couple of little things to highlight out of this. You have here in this in Leviticus 19, when you reap your harvest of your land, you should not reap all the way to the edges, so you can gather the gleanings of your harvest, which is provided to you. Shall leave them for the poor and the alien. Then you shall not steal, you shall not deal falsely, you shall not lie to one another, on and on. You shall not defraud your neighbor, shall not steal. Talks about the deaf and a stumbling block to the blind. You shall not render an unjust judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great. With justice you shall judge your neighbor. You shall not go around as a slanderer among your people. On and on it goes. And then here in 17, you shall not hate in your heart any one of your kin. You shall reprove your neighbor, or you will incur guilt yourself. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge with any of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So clearly that is where one of the places Jesus is pulling this from. Then I just wanted to make sure that we see here at the end of this chapter as well, something that might be important for later. When an alien resides with you in your land, you shall not oppress the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as a citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself. For you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. All right. So those are the relevant texts. And here is the most relevant person. Mark.
I wish I was. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening.
How's it
Sorry about
going?
last week, but technology demons got me last
Oh
week.
man. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Don't worry about it. Yeah.
yeah,
It happens.
yeah,
Happens to the best of us, right?
yeah, yeah. So we I've been noticing
Well,
that Matthew is doing an awesome job in terms of creating from say chapter say 19 or so up to now, creating that tension, that ever growing tension between Jesus and the religious elite. I mean, he's doing an
right.
awesome job of building it. It's building. It's
Yeah.
it's like going up a mountain.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And he's definitely doing an awesome job. So you can feel the tension in the text.
Right. No,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. And it's clear, you know.
yeah.
Yeah, it's real clear.
There's no doubt about that. That the tension is the building and we're heading towards um well, I won't say an explosive but definitely more a definite period of conflict here.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, just out of a strange kind of course of events, I was supposed to be gone away this coming weekend
okay,
from church, and then I switched it to the 15th. So I switched the whole kind of service from the 29th up to the 15th, when they had a hymn sing and had some other stuff going on. So in my church, they already read these texts on the 15th. And
okay,
we'll be doing something different on Sunday, but
okay.
yeah, but it's interesting.
So you already preached this already?
I didn't preach it because I wasn't there that Sunday. It was just
Okay,
like they did a hymn sing and they read the text and did a little liturgy.
okay,
So it was no preaching, but it was interesting because the person who was doing the liturgy that day said that they kind of just made, a little comment at the end of the reading about the situation going on in Palestine,
okay,
at the time, because so
okay, okay.
they thought it was interesting that we had
Yeah,
this
yeah,
love your neighbor
yeah,
text
yeah,
in the midst of that kind of thing going on.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and unfortunately, it will still be going on.
Yeah, for a while, yeah. I think it's interesting. I know you read the Leviticus text, and one thing that Ellen Davies does a good, excellent job of pointing out in her book that we're dealing with an ancient community who um, who was homeless. Who has a
Right,
history of being homeless. I mean, Deuteronomy 26, a wandering Aramean was my father. These
right,
people don't have no home; they don't have no land.
yeah,
So so now in Leviticus, they're coming into the process of settling a land they feel that Yahweh has given to them, and then we're in the New Testament in which that's at risk from
right,
Rome. So
right,
so,
right,
so the thing is, it's always a tension about are we going to have this land?
right, right.
Yeah,
And what's interesting is that you know it's interesting because in the New Testament, I mean, Jesus. It'd be interesting to go. I mean, I'm just trying to think in my head right now because I don't want
yeah,
to speak too far out of turn. But I mean, clearly, part of the critique and part of the conflict with the religious elite is along the same lines as that prophetic line of saying, like, you don't deserve this land. Like
right,
you have done wrong. Like you've taken what the Lord has given you, and you've been giving it to Caesar, basically.
right, right.
You have.
You
I mean,
the,
we
the, the,
just
the-
had the coin,
right,
the coin last week.
right,
So and clearly, on top of that, there is a clear in all the gospels, critique of the temple,
right.
structure and the way that it's being run.
The whole
Um,
political economics, because
yeah,
if according to to Matthew Carter, that these folk, the religious elite, are folks that probably have, I won't say they have estates, but they got nice pieces of property.
right,
And
right,
according to Carter, that the religious elite were in a, I guess, relationship with Rome to a certain way.
right,
So you allow certain things, and we'll allow you to have all this nice stuff.
right,
So they're always coming from a position of privilege.
right,
Yeah. And Jesus, following Carter's logic, he Jesus would fall into those, maybe not the people of the land, but he's not maybe at the bottom of the social economic spectrum, but he ain't that far from it.
right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah. And his followers would
yeah,
be the same way. And
right,
then we're looking at this text, if it's written after 70 AD, I mean, they're dispersed again, at
right,
least out of Jerusalem anyway.
right.
So,
Well, and it's interesting because especially thinking about Paul and thinking about the letters of the New Testament and the
yeah,
writings of the New Testament. I mean, I think you legitimately have to ask yourself, would this movement have actually taken off if the temple wasn't destroyed?
that's a good question.
I mean, would there have been a Christianity if there wasn't a struggle over making meaning
Right,
post temple?
right,
Because I mean, whether it was part of Jesus, actual oral history or whether it's put in afterwards, I mean, the reframing of what it means, for the presence of God to be among a people
right, right,
is basically what Paul's about.
right,
I mean, everything he's writing is about that,
right,
and reframing the temple around Jesus, basically.
right.
And many of the gospels are the same,
Right.
so I mean, and I don't want to take this in too political of a direction, but I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, it's like we as Christians, like how do we deal with that reality, um especially realizing that, like, the religious the religio-political element of this current conflict is all around the Al-Aqsa Mosque, all around the Temple of the Dome, all around the fact that that the conservative Jewish people that are in power want to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque and rebuild the temple. You know,
Okay.
like that's
Okay.
like this Hamas movement was called the Al-Aqsa Flood.
Mm.
It's based on defending that mosque to some degree.
Right.
Is the Islamic side of it.
Right. Right.
So, like, how do we, like, I don't know, I mean, how do you avoid kind of a supersessionism, but at the same time recognize that your whole religion is based on a post temple, like
Right.
non rebuilding of the
Post,
temple.
post temple, and if like you said earlier, post synagogues. I think we talked earlier that maybe these folks might have been
Right,
kicked out of the synagogue or
right,
did not feel welcome. So they are isolated from their traditional religious community,
right,
and they're developing identity outside of temple,
right,
outside of synagogue.
right,
And what does it mean to be God's people outside of temple and outside of synagogue?
right, right, right.
And I think
Well, and then
one of
yeah,
the challenges for us is that, well, challenges for a lot of us is for challenge. I mean, the challenge for traditional white America is that
right,
they didn't have that problem. That they were welcome. The challenges for people of color and other groups is that they have always been, in America anyway, felt that they're outsiders.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So how does traditional Christianity deal with that? With the fact that they haven't faced that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and how, like, and it's funny because, like, I mean, and I think, and like not only is there's the temple issue, but like clearly there's a redefining of the land
Hmm.
as not just this particular land, but the inheritance is the whole cosmos. That there's this new redefinition of what, there's a new heaven, a new earth, a new
Right.
Jerusalem that's
Right.
not necessarily centered. We don't know where that is,
Yeah.
like, and
It's
it's
not.
not
It's not one particular locus.
right,
It's not temple. It's not synagogue.
right,
It's wherever where two or three are gathered.
right. And
Yeah, yeah,
and
right.
and whatever the image is of the thing, even if you think of it as a physical reality, it comes down out of heaven. Like it's
Right.
not built here,
Right.
like whatever, if you want to think of that thing, um the this the communities, the people who stream into it, the people who will become a part of it are people who are manifesting it here.
Right.
But
Right.
but whatever that new thing is,
Yeah.
it says that the old has passed away,
Right.
so um and I think, this is a big part of a big part of Reform Judaism, and it's a big part of even like some of the hyper orthodox
Yeah.
Judaism, is that they don't believe that, that the temple like they don't believe that all those, like the things about the temple being rebuilt, and and that sort of like very Zion focused
Yeah.
reality is what should be the focus.
Right.
I mean, Reform Judaism and on is already in the reality of the temple being destroyed, and
Right.
and the temple being the even the family table, and the and the synagogue, like that reality.
Yeah. I guess we see in the New Testament what you know with the development, the rise of rabbinic Judaism. That was an attempt to try to reestablish the norm again.
Right.
I think the problem is that some of the elites got in bed the Romans, but at least that was
Right.
there's supposed to be an attempt to
Right.
redefine what it meant to be, what it
Yeah.
meant to be to have how to practice Judaism again outside of temple,
Right.
or outside
Right.
of temple anyway.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think about, like, especially because we have is the Gospels to talk about Jesus, and obviously they were written, all of them were written either. I mean, even Mark was probably written post destruction of temple, and even
Post
if you want to
70.
make it early, that it was inevitable. Like
Yeah.
whoever wrote it knew that it was coming down.
Right.
Like whoever, like all the writings know that it's not gonna stand.
Right.
So you have people in that reality writing, projecting it back prior to that.
Right.
Um,
And what's interesting when you mentioned Paul, he had to have seen this coming.
mhm,
He had to have felt the tension
right,
between his his fellow Pharisees and fellow Jews and
right,
Rome. He had to see it coming.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and his, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, everything has a real, yeah, even the writings of Paul are clear,
Yeah.
that there's this reality is coming.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So anyway, I mean, people, I don't, of course, we never have to worry too much about being careful who's listening, because there's never that many people listening, so it's not a big deal. Oh, I have to tell you, Mark, you'll get a kick out of this. I went up to talk to Otis Moss
Yeah. You mentioned that. Yeah.
after the event, right after the event, and
Yeah.
I was telling him how, I needed to make sure I said hi to him, because some people I do a podcast with are big fans of his, and he was like, "Oh, what a podcast?" And I was saying, so I was about the lecture. He's like, "Oh, what is it called?" I was just listening to what I said. Look, Otis, if you're listening to if you're checking out our lectionary podcast, you might have gone off on the wrong. You got on the wrong channel somewhere. All right. I don't think you're one of the 2 people or 3 people that are checking it out.
He's supposed to be doing No, he went. He had just left when
Yeah.
that thing started.
No,
He's supposed to be doing the debrief on Thursday.
yeah, he said that actually some of the people he was with got stuck.
Trapped, trapped over
Yeah,
there.
so some of the
Yeah,
people that he was traveling with, he
yeah,
said he left a little early.
yeah,
But yeah, no,
yeah,
for sure, for sure.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so anyway, I mean, back to this, well, you know what I mean, I know that you've mentioned a few different times, you know, maybe reading you've done or something you've done about, you know, the people of the land, um, the people who stayed behind or were left behind,
yeah,
after the exile, um, and the kind of the way that they were looked on and treated, um, by those returning. Uh, and so, I mean, I think that plays into this love your neighbor and love your, um, you know, love the alien. That plays into this. I
yeah.
think some. Um, I think you know yeah. I mean, I think so. That's interesting, and I think that there's some really interesting correlations between that idea and what's going on now as
Yeah,
well. You
yeah,
know.
yeah. You know, you bring that up. You know, the people that return from exile, those who got deported were supposed to be the cream of the crop,
Right.
and the
Right.
folks left behind were supposed to have been. One will say they were ones that didn't have maybe the technical skills. They weren't the artists. They weren't the
Right.
musicians. They weren't the teachers.
Right.
No, they were those were struggling to make it.
Right.
I can imagine those folks who returned probably had some looked at those folks a little sideways,
Right. Right.
little bit. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because I mean, it was the elites
yeah,
and the folks like that and the scribes and
yeah,
stuff that were exiled.
yeah,
And then the people who could work the land were kept on the land,
yeah,
so they can continue to work the
yeah,
land just for someone different,
yeah,
right? Yeah, I mean, I guess, and to me, obviously, this is kind of like the remaining. This remains a problem even to Jesus's day.
yeah.
You know, who gets the love and who gets the support. You
Because
know,
really, it's the same dynamic. The folks
yeah,
that return, they were allowed to return because of the Persians, because of
right,
Cyrus and whatever. So
yeah,
they had some cordial relationship with the dominating power.
right,
Same thing with the Pharisees and Sadducees.
right,
It's the same,
right,
almost the same dynamic.
right, right, yeah. And it makes me think of I wonder if I can. I'm gonna see if I can grab the. Oh, I think I might have closed the Bible. Um, I was thinking too about because there's the story of I lost you somewhere in there. Just a second. Because you know earlier in Matthew, there's also the story of the rich young ruler.
Hmm.
You know, and his question is not that different, you know, than this question here.
Hmm.
You know, he's asking in Matthew 19, you know, he's basically asking, um, you know, what do I need to do? You know,
Right,
and Jesus is telling him some of the commandments to follow, right? And
right.
he says, "Oh, I've followed all of
Yeah,
those,"
yeah.
you know. um, but then, you know, Jesus tells him that the next,
Is to identify with those left behind,
right,
identify with the wretched,
right,
identify with the marginalized,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm
So so you know, um, teacher, what good deed must I do to have eternal life? And he
right,
said to him, why do you ask me what is good? There's only, you know, one who is good. If you wish to enter life, keep the commandments. And he said to him, which ones? You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, not prefer wildness, honor your mother and father, you shall love your neighbors yourself. The young man said to him, I have kept all these. What do I
check the
still
boxes,
lack? Jesus said to
check
him,
the
if you wish to
boxes.
be perfect, go sell your possessions and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Um, you know, and then he said, you know, um, then come and follow me.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I mean, so yeah, I think you're right. I think there's there's that element too of that next the identifying with the people of the land, identifying with the non-elite, you know.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's the challenge. I mean, I think the challenge is in this text is, if this is written after 70 AD, how does this community love those who basically dogged them? How do they do that? How do they practice that? That had to be an ongoing question for the community of Matthew.
Right. Yeah.
How do
Well,
we?
and you know, and this is the thing that's so kind of like disturbing about the present situation in Palestine,
Mhm.
right? Is because the Palestinians are the people of the land,
Yes.
right? They are. I mean, in fact, what's crazy is that like they could even be some of the elite and the people of the land of 70 AD,
Mhm.
you know, and who are still there.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's 2,000 plus years ago,
Yeah.
you know. And so basically you have this group of people who are returning from exile
Yeah.
from Europe,
Yeah.
who are coming into a place with a bunch of people who are you know, without getting, you know, who are basically, even by genetic analysis, they're you know, the same, you know, like the same people,
Yeah.
basically, you
Yeah.
know. And and you have this situation of occupation, you know,
Yeah.
oppression.
Right. Right. Right.
I mean,
And-
it's hard to, you know, I mean, like, I mean, let alone, you know, separate, like, I guess, like, for me, like, yes, I mean, well, I mean, I know where I stand politically on the issue.
yeah.
I guess, you know, part of what is interesting to me in relation to this text is, as Christians, we know that there's a whole set of Christians that are the same ones who espouse white Christian nationalism,
Right.
who are all the way in on Christian Zionism,
Right.
you know. And so, like, how do we, you know, I feel like that it's like one and the same thing, you
Yeah.
know. It's
I-
like, if you can, you have to figure out how to fight this on these two fronts. It has to be, you know, you have to fight this particular mentality
right.
as Christian Zionism, but it also manifests as white Christian nationalism.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like they're joined at the hip because they're both settler projects,
Right. And I
you
think
know.
even from a social economic perspective, we here in America, I mean, we believe in private ownership of land.
Right.
We believe- And these are people in Palestine and Gaza who who again, like you said, that they don't own a lot. They don't own a lot of land.
Right.
They own a lot of land.
Right.
And so it's difficult for us who believe in this private ownership of property and land. I mean, that's the American dream.
Right.
You know, I mean,
Right.
we're talking about a whole different social economic perspective when you talking about folks in Gaza and Palestine.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what's fascinating about that is that, like, it's, I mean, and it's eerily similar to us, because, you know, why do they own so little land?
Right. Right. And
You know, because
that's the issue.
I mean,
And that's the issue that I've gotten in trouble with some of my friends. They say,
yeah,
"Well, they think I'm anti-Semitic." I said, "No, the problem is that this has been an ongoing issue until we bring all folks to the table and all folks have a voice. Then you risk creating the conditions that are conducive to the development of an organization like Hamas." Because
Mhm.
you're dealing with years and years of frustration. and years of folks feeling like they're powerless. And when you do that, I don't care if it's the Middle East, I don't care if it's Latin America, I don't care if it's here, wherever it's.
Right.
If you create those conditions, then you can create the conditions in which an organization like Hamas can arise, because you have not dealt with the important issue of the powerlessness and helplessness and the voicelessness of the people who are struggling. You're not dealt with that.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, this is it. You know, I mean, this is it right here. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, this is 1946 Palestine.
Yeah.
You know,
I wish you could blow it up, but that's okay.
Huh?
I wish you could blow it up.
I probably can if I.
Yeah, I know it might be a little difficult, like this laptop. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, that's a little. Let me now. I can, if I do this,
okay,
it'll probably almost all fit on there.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, like, this is the thing. I mean, that we, you know, so up until 47, 48, I mean, this is the land of Palestine. It's occupied by the British, but it is Palestine. There's no, I mean, like, the Jewish people there are the Jewish people that are there, that are the people of the land, the people who are still there. Some of them are Arab, some of them are Jewish, some of them are Christian. You know, they're there. Then we decide, you know, the UN, everybody out of World War II decides that all of a sudden part of this land is going to become the state of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And all these European Jews are going to get to be here. But somehow, you know, the people who are occupying this green are going to have to go here to the little bit of green, you know, and then, you know, as time goes by, they just have to keep getting smaller and smaller,
right?
You know, into these places. I mean, and I think it's hard for us as people of the United States, because obviously, like, we are the people who genocided another people to have the land that we call
right.
Our
Yeah,
land.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Indigenous Americans. Yeah, I mean,
right. So we're okay with this.
Yeah.
This is our history.
Right.
We are fine with this.
Right.
You know, like this doesn't bother. And if we can paint them all as scary Muslims and
right.
You know, and whatever, then all the better. You know,
right.
You know, it's easy for us, you know. And so, you know, I think that's the part that and the additional thing is, you know, I don't, you know, now I'm about to, I don't, yeah, I mean, sometimes I wonder, sometimes I feel bad about, you know, only so many people watching, but then I get ready to say something and I realize, you know, I'm kind of glad.
But you know, I think part of the problem is as we look at our faith, we forget that we follow a wandering preacher who says foxes have holes and birds have nests, but I ain't got nowhere to lay my head.
Right.
I don't have nothing.
Right.
You know, but so I guess the question is, how do we go from following a person like that to the Crystal Cathedral?
Right.
Yeah.
Or be, you know, or being the strongest possible advocates for, you know, genocide. You know, just like, hey, that's fine. Go ahead. Do what you got to do. Uh-oh.
There he is.
Yeah, trouble is here.
He came in before I said anything too much.
There he is.
He knew to come in and catch me before I. How you doing, Leonard?
Oh, look, I'm beat. You know, I just got so behind when I had COVID and then everything else.
Yeah.
You know, it's real sad. And like I say about this, you know, Europe had a problem and they didn't want to deal with it.
Right.
So they put it elsewhere. That's, you know,
a
real problem. And I don't want to say it because we don't know history.
Yeah.
and history of the religion. We've done some things and listened and agreed with some things that aren't basically correct.
Right.
Because when you look at who is the descendant of Solomon, you're actually talking about, in a lot of instances, the Ethiopian Jews,
Mhm.
and they aren't treated the best. And
Mhm.
I mean, Dr. Cannon shared with me when she was in school, she went to Israel.
Hmm.
She experienced, you know, segregation as bad as it was where she
Mhm.
grew up in North Carolina, or worse.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
She couldn't even stay with her fellow students, and this was in the 70s.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I was just listening to a podcast. It was a guy. He's I mean he's I think he's either Dominican or Puerto Rican, but he presents dark skin,
Mhm.
here in America. And he went on a trip to to Israel, and went to Palestine, and was just saying, like that it was crazy, like, people getting, like, arriving into Tel Aviv, and after all that, you still could get you didn't know when you could get pulled out of line and sent home, like, if they just didn't like, they just, and especially if you were darker skin, you know and his name, I think, was Hiram or something like that. Like they were like, okay, who's this? Who's this? Like, why are you
Mhm.
here? What are you doing here? What's your plan? And they're just ready to take you out and put you
Yeah.
back. Send you back home.
And Jamar Tisby did a nice piece on that too. When he was at Notre
Mm.
Dame, he went to
Mm.
Palestine. But yeah, I've sort of framed this thing in the Old Testament where it says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
Mm.
Now, I don't condone what Hamas did at all, but an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth meant retribution was not to be greater than the
Mhm.
Mhm.
punishment. And when you talk about 1,600, and now you're talking about over 4 or 5,000, and that doesn't count, people who have been killed before. And when you put people, like I've heard it referred to as a open air prison, and they can't go in and out, and what they need is
Right.
not there. I mean, what do you expect?
Right.
And that's the and that's the UN
Right.
says that. It's not just like, people just making up things, you know what I mean? Like that, the UN is saying, calls it an
Right.
open air prison,
Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, if you when you fail to deal with years and years of people feel like they have no voice, people feel like who just feel like they're voiceless and nobody's hearing their concerns. You create the conditions which is conducive for the development of Hamas. I don't care that can be middle, that can be here, that can be in Middle East, that can be in Latin America, that can be here. If people feel like there's no voice, if they feel um, totally unrepresented, you create those conditions.
And I mean, the agreement was made for two states, but Netanyahu has done everything he can to keep that from happening.
Right.
And
Well, and I'll just, since we're talking about eye for an eye, you know, um, you know, this is deaths and injuries since 2008. This is the Palestinian side. This is the Israel side. I mean,
Yeah.
this is. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
2008, and and we're talking about. I mean, and that's the thing that troubles me. I think, on especially for, I mean, we know this about Christians and religious people, but it still is troubling that we have a faith that is so based in having. I mean, there's no one in the New Testament, there's no one in the New Testament, the Old Testament, who doesn't write from a perspective of the history that they understand about their people and about their historical context. people they write from this place of knowing their history. Sometimes it's made up. but I mean, like at least they take that into
Right.
account. Like we act like October 7th dropped out of the sky and these people did this horrible thing out of nowhere.
Right.
And it's like,
right.
what? Excuse me.
Right.
Like you have been, it's kind of like, I always say it's kind of like Little House on the Prairie or something like that. Like whenever the little town that Laura Ingalls Wilder is in is attacked by by indigenous people, like it's not because like all of a sudden they woke up one day and decided that they were like evil.
Right.
Like it's because you took them from a
Right,
certain place where they
yeah,
were
yeah,
living
yeah,
happily
right,
on a land
right.
and pushed them all the way like
Yeah,
out west, and then you just kept punishing and like oppressing them. Like, yes, every once in a while someone's going to be like, hey, you're not giving me any chance to live.
Right.
I'm going to do something about it.
Like Ned Turner.
Yeah. It seems like America wants to develop an intentional dementia. Intentionally wants to forget. It's past.
Right.
What is so theologically based? I mean, when you look at people saying that Palestine is not a part of Africa, when it is,
Yeah.
and then when you look at North Africans, I mean, I couldn't believe this, that if you're Egyptian, Morocco, Libyan, you're considered white by the State Department of the United States.
Yeah.
And so it all plays in that, the depictions of Jesus that we see is supposed to play out in Israel.
Right.
People
Right.
never think about that.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
that's the way this whole thing is.
Yeah.
And then, the groups like the guy down in Texas, I can't think of what his name. He said, well, Israel has to be in control of the land for God to return. And I'm saying, what kind of sense did that make? When Jesus came, the Romans controlled it then. So
Control the land, yeah.
Well, and this is what we were saying earlier. I don't know if this is my thing about this, is that I mean, I don't think Christianity takes on any traction at all if the temple is still standing. I mean, all of Paul, all of the main thing that Jesus is talking about is what happens post temple, what happens post Jerusalem, what happens in this new phase when we don't know what our base is. When the Spirit is directing us, and when the Spirit is the place where two or three are gathered together, there is the temple.
We have to redefine what it means to be the community of God, people of God again.
Right.
It's not defined with a specific locus of temple or synagogue.
Right. And not to mention the fact that we all know what happens in the end to the Jewish people who don't become Christians in this Armageddon scenario that we need Jerusalem to be in the hands of the Jews for. They all get annihilated anyway. It's a pretty twist.
And knowing the history, you go back to the 10 Commandments, and I always said God gave the Jewish people the 10 Commandments so they wouldn't pick up the habits of their oppressors.
Right.
Yeah. Community.
Right. It's the rules for community.
Yeah. And the thing is, it seems like they have picked up everything, what they experienced with Hitler and whatnot, instead of being, people concerned, they're acting just like, they're oppressors.
Yeah. And I think that's part of trauma too. We haven't talked about, because we've sort of inferred it, the impact of trauma. I mean, the trauma of, you got 722, 587, you got Persia, then you got the Greeks. I mean that had to have a tremendous traumatic effect on these people.
Yeah, but I'm talking about modern time. And I mean, I go to the Holocaust Museum here. Mm-hmm. I study the story, and so, I would do nothing to downplay the importance of the Holocaust. But the thing is, if you've experienced that, why would you do the same thing to somebody?
Right. And why wouldn't you empathize with the American Holocaust?
Yeah, well,
You know,
Yeah,
you,
but you
Uh-oh.
know, it's strange. You know, a lot of them do. You know, a lot of them do. I give that
right,
to them. Uh,
Right.
but uh, you know, it's just it's crazy. You know,
Right.
and the thing is,
Well,
with all the geopolitical powers going around in that area, you know, I'm just worried what Iran is going to do, and
right,
Saudi
right.
Arabia has pulled back,
right.
you know, their deal. Uh, what can happen? I mean, you got all
Right.
these groups, and I mean, it's just like, you know, we talk about we got rid of ISIS, but now we got something worse.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's I don't know. I mean, I have a hard time with these people, but all the news shows on the weekend were talking about how Iran and Lebanon and these people might escalate. It's like, well, you already sent the warships over
Yeah.
there. You're already occupying Syrian oil against their
Right.
will. Like you're already in
Right.
Iraq against their
Right.
will.
And that,
Who's escalating
and,
what? I mean,
and
who, like
Darren,
how are they escalating against
you
us
mentioned the
whenever
key word, oil.
right? I mean,
It always comes
and
down to economics.
you know, I mean, that's the thing about it to me. It's like well,
Yeah, I know.
okay, I don't
No,
know. I don't,
it's
I
it's
don't, I
complicated,
don't.
and you know, and people will label you for, I mean, trying to be fair.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
Right.
you know, Mark was talking about the coverage, and the only place I'm getting really, you know, coverage of both sides is PBS.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm.
they're telling both sides of
Yeah.
it, and
Right.
they're saying, you know, this is not propaganda, because see, people say when you see that, they've been labeling what we see coming out of Gaza as propaganda.
Propaganda. Yeah.
And then, you know, they tell them to go to the South, and now they bombing the South. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, what
Right.
it's like they want to get all of those people off that land so they can take that.
Right. Yeah, and it's not like, I mean, and you can actually, all you have to do is actually listen to the actual Israeli military and their
Yeah.
government. I mean, they're saying it. You know, they already called them human beasts. You know, they already said that they already said they were going to do it. You know, they already said I mean, I'm going to show one more graph and then I'll be done. Okay. But I mean, again, here's deaths from 1987 on. The red is the Palestinians, the blue is Israel. I mean, it's just been, you
Yeah.
know, uh, it's if this is the reality you're living in, you know,
And you
and they
fighting
just
with rocks like David. I
Yeah.
saw a little boy winded up just like David would have wound
Yeah.
up.
right. And then if you do that, even I mean, we're talking about, oh my God. Okay, I'm gonna try to try to calm down because I mean, we're talking about these hostages,
Yeah,
these hostages that they have. I mean, there are 13-year-old, 12-year-old boys, girls in jail in Israel who for throwing
Yeah.
rocks. I mean and that's they've been there's hundreds of them. I mean they've been in. And what are they? Are they prisoners of war? I mean, what
Right.
are they? If you're holding them, and they're lucky because they didn't get
Yeah.
shot for throwing a rock, because that's perfectly legitimate,
Yeah.
and then those
but
rubber bullets aren't
huh?
really rubber bullets; they're rubber on the outside. I'm gonna
Right.
send you an article of Jamar Tisby that he wrote about his experience over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He got to live on both sides.
Yeah.
I sent it to you, Mark, didn't I?
Okay. I think I got. Yeah. Yeah. I think I got. Yeah. I did get it. Yeah.
Very, you know, he was much more subdued about it than I thought he would be. But then he had so
Yeah.
many rocks being thrown at him. He needed to be
Right.
careful.
Yeah. From other stuff he's wrote and he's written. Yeah. Yeah. He's done.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult because you can get in some deep trouble, real
Yeah.
quick, and this is and and then how, so and that should let you know how slanted the coverage is. You know, if someone can just say a certain thing and be completely kind of removed from the public view, that journalists, that people, who are getting paid,
Yeah, because,
thousands and thousands of dollars to report are not going to step across a line, like
yeah,
that.
because I heard that some of the Harvard students, what they said, their names are going to be passed on to businesses so they won't be hired.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it's really,
Well, there's a lot. There was, I saw a story of law professors writing to the law firms that their interns in, saying, don't accept these students because they have a particular point of
Yeah.
view about this. I mean,
Yeah.
it's well, you talked about the Holocaust Museum. Like, I think Germany, right, has basically either outlawed protests, or, like, they have, like, I mean, so you think about the fact that, like, these people who, I mean, it's the depth of the irony and the just the cynicism of it is insane.
Yeah.
The people who perpetrated this horror and say that they'll, it can never happen
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
are silencing the voices trying to stop it from happening again.
But when you think,
You know,
when we think
That's
about
just-
this text, again, we have an itinerant preacher who is the bottom of the social economic spectrum, talking to the elite, who, when he talks about, what the commandment, love,
Right.
these folks, the elite, couldn't stand the folks at the bottom. So, I mean, you talk about hypocrisy. They could not stand the folks that Jesus was a part of,
Right.
And so, I mean,
Right.
and so, I mean, they had utter contempt for them,
Right.
So, and if we
Yeah.
think about today, I mean, that there's folks in the churches and that have utter contempt for those at the bottom or struggling.
I never thought I'd see this, but I lived too long.
Oh, I see. I'm not. The chat's not bringing in Cheryl's
Yeah,
comments.
hit the
but,
chat button on the screen up or on your side, and then it will show up.
yeah, for some reason,
Yeah, 'cause
I'm seeing the Facebook things over on that Cheryl's sharing on the yeah, but it's not coming through for some
Because
reason.
I have a little spot I have to hit that says chat. It's a whole lot of little
And
Yeah.
Okay.
on the side.
I'm gonna I'll I'm gonna try to get her comments in from put them in from my side here.
I guess my thing is, how do we get to the place where we follow an itinerant preacher, like I said earlier, who said, "Foxes have holes and birds have nests, but I don't have nowhere to sleep." How do we
Right.
how do we get to that point? Maybe because we push we talk too much about the risen Christ, but we don't talk about Jesus, the itinerant preacher. Is that
Right.
it, Leonard? You think, or what is it?
It's messed up. Repeat your statement again, because I was trying
That I guess, how is it we gotten to the point where we follow an itinerant preacher who was a part of the bottom of the social economic spectrum, said, "I have nowhere to sleep, nowhere to lay my head," but yet we follow him, we call him master, we call him Lord, but yet we tend to look down on those folks.
but because see, we really don't follow that itinerant preacher.
Yeah.
We have this Pauline theology that, and Jesus has gone to glory.
Yeah.
And so we glorify Jesus there, but never think, like I'm saying, when Jesus put on human flesh, that was humiliation. and the death was total humiliation. And then you have the glorification. But the thing is, how can you appreciate the glorification if you don't appreciate the humiliation?
Humiliation, yeah.
And most Christians do not read the gospel. But let's
Yeah.
just face it, they don't read the gospels. It's Paul and a little bit in the Old Testament.
Right.
And that was all the early church had. That's all
Right,
Jesus
right.
had.
All I had.
And people ask me sometimes, well, why do you preach so much Old Testament? I said that's all Jesus had to preach.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I'll risk it here. You can just you can distance yourself from me, but I mean, most of the current scholarship would tell you that, what we imagine from the book of Joshua, where the Israelites came in from some other place and conquered this land, never happened. That the Israelites were Canaanites that all of a sudden decided to become Israelites at some point in history. More like the Judges kind of understand it. Like more like the book of Judges portrays it. And so like even the idea of an us and them in Palestine right now is very muddy. It's basically like you said before, Leonard. There's a bunch of people from Europe who were persecuted in Europe, and mainly because those European countries were so anti-Semitic, they wanted to get rid of them and send them somewhere else.
Send them to Tanzania so they would die.
Yeah.
Well, and it's basic. It's very similar to the abolitionist rhetoric of this, of the Civil War period. Of yes, we want you to be free, but we want you to, as soon as you're free, we need to get
out of
you
here.
out
Go
of
somewhere
here.
else.
You need to
Be
get
somewhere else.
You need to get
Be
gone.
free here.
We don't we don't want you. We don't want to Holocaust you. We don't want you in slavery. But like, if you're out of slavery, we need you to be somewhere else.
Yep.
And what's real amazing is, the curse on Canaan. The real purpose of that is to give cover for taking control of the land.
Yeah.
And then it was switched around to make us feel inferior with the curse of Ham. So you got two perverted things coming out of one story.
Yeah. Yeah. So I well, clearly, committing genocide against another people is not loving them.
Right.
We can at least, from the text, we can at least say that, if nothing else, if nothing
what
else.
Moss was preaching about yesterday. He said, "Who is your God if you do all of these?"
Who is your God? Yep. I heard that sermon. Yep.
Well, and I think that's, I think that's a, that's a legitimate,
That's a relevant question.
I think that maybe that's where, that maybe that's what we need to really be talking about, like, I know for me, like last Sunday, I decided at the last minute to do the text on the taxes, or give to Caesar what's Caesar and what is God's is God's. It's the same. That's the same thing. Like what are you doing with your resources? You know what I mean? If and who is your God? What does it say about your God with what you do with what you have?
I think that means that and I think you always talk about this. I think we always have to. I don't want to use the word challenge. We need to get folks to really start thinking about their theology a little bit. And in the church, we need to start thinking about our theology and asking the question, where's this stuff? Where's this coming from?
Right. Because the coin, the coin that Jesus, the coin that Jesus has to have someone else give him, because he doesn't have it. He doesn't want anything to do with it, But for us nowadays, it's not a coin, it's bombs.
Yeah.
It's bullets. They have they have the name of the empire on them. And we pay to send them over there. We pay to manufacture them. We do all of that. That's where our taxes go.
And not to mention the how gun ownership has become almost a religion here. Yeah.
Right. Well, and actually, I mean, I'm gonna get me in big trouble here. But I mean, it's again, any civilian death is terrible, but it is a policy of the state of Israel to put those communities as close to the border of the occupied territory as possible as a defense. They are the iron wall. Those kibbutzes get put in those places, just like we have a Second Amendment so that we could put little settlements around places and make sure that they were armed and they could pull up a militia and go and kill indigenous people if they came into the territory, or if slaves ran away, they could make sure that they could either be shot or returned.
Right.
I mean, it's the same. I mean, I think that we have a problem trying to understand this situation because for at least for the white people in this country, it is so in our DNA.
Right.
To be the settlers. We feel what they feel so intimately because we did it.
Manifest destiny.
And that's what Freddie Haynes said.
Yeah.
He said, the United States supported in Africa and asked with apartheid in Israel because we started here in the United States.
Right.
It is while we now condemn it, from a distance at least, it is still so much a part of the way that we imagine our world. That we have a hard time getting past that, I don't. I hope we can get to a better place, but I'm not sure, I'm not sure.
It's going to be real hard.
It's a process. Again, we're talking about, getting people to understand what loving your neighbor is, but you got to redefine, redefine for themselves again, like Mars said, who is your God?
Right.
Start.
But until people get to understand the Bible, get to understand history, it's not going to change.
Well, I would think that, at least a certain segment of people could understand, there's no reason why Palestinians should be punished for German crimes. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't make any sense, first of all. And then, and that somehow it's almost as if they're also somehow responsible for Roman crimes as well. It's like how much can you take out on one group of people that are actually a part of your people. I mean, in the end, that's the crazy thing.
And see, I really, it bothers me how they call some people terrorists when Menachem Begin, blew up the King David Hotel.
Yeah.
It's just
But
that's just like the stuff that's banned here in the United States.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and terrorism basically is like just you don't have the military capacity to do the serious damage. So you're a terrorist.
Yeah.
Like, if you can actually like really just level buildings and whole areas, then you can't be a terrorist because, obviously you have superior firepower.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's really a, again, it's almost like a belittling term. You don't want to compare actual like deaths and make that the measurement. It has to be something else.
Yeah.
But it just gets to me when I see all those children being killed.
Yeah.
I think one of the keys for me as we look at this text is that going back to the Old Testament, where the Old Testament frames the whole love your neighbor as remember when you were
Right.
Right.
hope
Right.
you were the stranger. Remember when you were homeless, you were landless.
Right.
I think that's
Right.
the that's the problem. Yeah, we want to forget that part.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also, I think it's easy to forget that, this love your neighbor is again, as Moss would probably remind us, that it comes in the context of also love the Lord your God with all your heart,
Right.
soul, mind, and
And
strength.
that's
You know what I mean? Like, if your God is a God who loves the neighbor,
And you should.
you know what I mean?
Right.
Like how can you're not in love with that
Right.
God if you're not, it's probably one of those too simple formulas.
Right.
It's just about actually living it out.
Right.
It makes it, it's pretty straightforward, the intent and the meaning. It's just about actually doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Micah 6:8, which says you walk hand in hand with your God who is doing that, who is promoting justice, who is giving love and care. You walk hand in hand with a God who's doing that.
Right.
So, wow.
Yeah. What are you preaching on this Sunday, Leonard?
I haven't.
You got this one?
I finished the series in Isaiah. I did.
Okay.
And so fortunately I don't only work Thursday and Friday this week. So
okay.
I voted today and I got me a smoker, and so I finally got that primed and whatnot.
Ooh, all right. All right.
And I went to the gym today and I slept late. So
Okay.
I don't want to burn out. So tomorrow I'm gonna work on that, and then I've got to get recertified for CPR because they want, we got so many vaccinations. I didn't keep my CPR certification up, and after everybody, I'm the only pharmacist there from 4:30 to 6, and they don't want me to be telling people, well, I can't give you a vaccine. So,
right.
I'm gonna get that straight between tomorrow and Wednesday.
Yeah.
Many things.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I got official date finally on my book.
Okay.
It's November the 28th.
That's when it comes out.
Oh, all right. All right.
$12.99 for paperback, $6.99 for Kindle.
Okay. So it's out there on Amazon now?
No, the 28th of November.
Okay, cool. Remind us so we can order.
Yeah,
for sure.
Remind us so we can order.
And that's your work on the small church.
On Rural Black Church, and I've got a whole section in there on theological issues that people need to address.
Okay. Right.
We don't, as a Christian ethicist,
right,
that theology, plays a big role.
Yeah.
So what's for next week?
That's a good question. What? It's Matthew 23, 1 through 12.
Okay.
I think I'm doing what's it called? All Saints on the 5th.
Okay.
So I'll be in a little bit different area.
Matthew 23, 1 through 12.
23, 1 through 12 is Jesus denounces scribes and Pharisees. Basically just they love the place of honor. in the banquets, being greeted with respect in the marketplaces.
Said that tension in Matthew is building. It's building.
Yeah.
We're heading up the hill.
It stops before the woes, which is
Yeah.
right. It stops before the woes. Yeah.
Okay. Just so let's pray for Marcy. I know she I think she's home now.
Yeah. She's home. But she said she still got a little cough or
Yeah.
something, kind of cold or something coming out of him. But yeah, that was kind of scary.
That was scary.
Yeah.
She called me. I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself. Yeah.
Right. Indeed. Yeah.
All right. Well, y'all. Good talk.
Good talking with y'all. Yeah.
Y'all take care.
Yeah.
Trying to keep myself under control.
Stay out of trouble.
I'll pop up every now and then.
Yeah, you do that. You do that for sure. Good to see you anytime.
All
right, everybody.
Sure. I should have sent the link to Cheryl. She could have jumped on and give us her perspective, but we'll get it next time for sure. Yeah.
All right.
Good talking to y'all.
All right.
Yeah.